Good afternoon. Thanks so much for joining us today for this very interesting topic that touches us all in some way. And we have two experts in their field today that will be presenting. And the first is Lenny Garrett. He is with the Heartland Institute, which is, I have that right, yep. Institute. There's so many foundations, institutes, but Heartland Institute, and they're based in Illinois. We've been friends with Heartland for many, many years and appreciate all the great work that they do. Lenny is the project manager for the Center for Transforming Education at the Heartland Institute. He's an expert on school choice. He has written nationally, certainly has been on national media, and we appreciate his expertise. And then after Lenny presents, we're going to hear from Rob Unger. And Rob has been the CEO for Rachel's Challenge, which he'll tell you more about, for 11 years. And before that, he had a business career with IBM and GE Capital. So we appreciate him coming today. He won't be talking about policy, but actually about the Rachel's Challenge program. So I think you'll all find that very interesting. So let's give both of our speakers a round of applause. And Lenny, come on up.
What I wanted to start off with some of the statistics so you can see what the problem is in the schools right now. Most parents don't believe their schools are safe. 34% of parents don't believe their school is safe. When you get into urban areas, the low-income parents, 48% of them don't believe their schools are safe. Nationally, though, if you look at it, parents that select another school of any type, whether it's public school, private school, they select something else they're going to do for their child, 53% of parents choose safety as the number one reason for selecting another education option. Though most people might think it's religious studies or whatever, but it is safety. There's stories out of Washington, D.C. If you ever heard anybody talk about what's going on in Washington, D.C. with their voucher program, a lot of the parents there is safety. They don't care if they're selecting a school for the education outcomes. They're not worried about that. What they worry about is their child going to come home to them after school each day? And that's kind of some of the situations we face. And I'll give you a few statistics about Colorado a little bit later on, kind of give you the background of nationally what's going on. It's more than just bullying. School violence consists of all sorts of things. There's actually rapes, robberies, all sorts of violent crimes, fights, gangs going on. Looking at the statistics, 79%. It sure isn't. It's not showing up there. Sorry, you're not seeing what I'm seeing here.
Let's just get back into this because this is not. I thought this was already set up. Right?
It was. Yeah. We tested beforehand, and now it's not working again. There. Okay.
There we go.
There we go. Okay. I thought you guys were seeing the slides and you weren't. So that's the slide I was just talking about. This PDK poll actually just came out back in June with some of these statistics. The links are here. One thing I remind you, my card's in the back. Please pick it up. If you want a copy of my presentation with the slides and the links to go look at the data, email me. I'll send it to you. Just going to start on this slide. 79% of public schools had a violent incident during the 2015-2016 school year. So that's why you see so many parents don't think their schools are safe, because it is basically 80%. 4 out of every 5 schools has had some type of violent incident in their school. 21% of students reported being bullied at school. And there have been more than 1 million serious offenses. There's a statistic that actually Rachel's Challenge has on their website too. 160,000 students skip school every day to avoid bullying or some other type of school violence. That's truancy costs, that hurts their education outcomes, everything, because it's affecting their mental health. They're worried more about being bullied in school than they are about learning. Wallet Hub did a study this year and started doing some rankings. Every 7 minutes, a child in the U.S. will be bullied. 80% of adults and other students will watch a child being bullied and do nothing. And that's something we have to change. And that's something Rachel's Challenge actually is very good at, is changing that behavior to help and protect these other kids that are being bullied. Colorado is actually ranked pretty well, actually. They're ranked 44. So the higher the number of the 44, it means the lower incidence of school violence you have. So Colorado is actually doing a pretty decent job on that. They're number 36 in bullying prevalence, 45 in bullying impact and treatment, and 46 in anti-bullying laws. So you can see here, the laws are not what's preventing the bullying, because the laws are actually very relaxed here, less regulated, but it's coming from other programs here in Colorado that is what is decreasing the bullying and the school violence. So it's not always asking the legislators for stricter laws. That's not necessarily going to help. In some of the other states, you can actually see how the difference is. They're very highly regulated on anti-bullying laws, and they're still ranked very, very high. Actually, Wyoming is one of those. Wyoming is actually number 10. So a state just north of you has a very high bullying prevalence. I wanted to talk a little bit about school shooter statistics. Since we're here in Denver with the first major school shooting in Columbine, and so we've got Rachel's Challenge is very directly related to that, and the gentleman in the back also directly related to that. 71% of shooters were known to be victims of bullying. A lot of the recent cases, you'll see the same thing, the school shootings. The shooter had been bullied. 2 cases in Illinois where the shooter went in. Both cases, they targeted the person that had been bullying them first. That's where they went in. 87% have left evidence that they were bullied. 34% had received a mental evaluation, but only 17% were actually diagnosed with a mental disorder. This is an area where legislators can actually look at on how can you diagnose this better. Not all people that are diagnosed with a mental disorder will become shooters, though. There's a lot of other factors and stuff going into it, and that's what you have to remember. The statistics show this out. It's not, mental disorders don't create a shooter. Actually, another one to look at, 78% of shooters have actually considered or attempted suicide, and I believe most shooters actually, when they're going in to shoot, they're expecting to actually commit suicide by police or commit suicide themselves when they're done their shooting. Wanted to show you a little bit here. You can see the ranking here. Back to Colorado's number 44. You are the best state of all your neighbors. So you can see the rankings around Colorado where everybody ranks. As I mentioned earlier, Wyoming is number 10. So they've got really a more issue. And they have the number 2 strongest anti-bullying laws in the country. So the law is not making the difference in actually preventing any type of school violence. So you can kind of take a look at that. One thing we do at Heartland is we kind of look at how school choice can actually start helping and preventing some of the school violence. And I wanted to kind of give you an overview of some of the education choice models. In Colorado, you're very familiar with charter schools here. It is a public school that's granted a charter by either the local districts in a lot of states and independent charter boards or by a state board. Every state has their own laws into how that works. A voucher program is a certificate that basically fully pays for the tuition for a student to attend another school. Education savings account, this is one of the newer models. Only 6 states have education savings accounts. Arizona was the first to pass one in 2011. And it's a parent-controlled savings account. So the state's basically taking the money it would for funding a child, put it into account that the parents would then direct for all the education options they need, and it provides them a little more flexibility, which is something that students that are victims of school violence, a lot of times they will need specialized therapies where ESAs come in very handy for helping with that kind of funding to get them the treatments to help them with the issues that they have to be dealing with. Tax credit scholarships. It's a credit. An individual corporation will donate money to a scholarship granting organization that then provides scholarships to all of the applicants. And so these are not everything Colorado has. These are around the country, some of the other programs that are going. If you ever want to look at one, The education savings account, Arizona. Voucher programs, the best ones in Indiana. Tax credit scholarships, the best one is in Florida. Individual education tax credit is personally people will deduct money they use for education expenses. And surprisingly, Illinois has the #1 individual education tax credit. Over 300,000 people in Illinois use that individual education tax credit every single year. So if you want to look at some of the models, the one in Illinois is very limited. Max is $500 a year. So it's very limited, but it does help out parents that are looking for options or they need special tutoring. They need training for other things. And just different options that they can use the money for. Actually, a lot of the homeschoolers in Illinois actually use the individual education tax credit. So one of the questions I know you're probably having is, why school choice and how does it help safety? Well, there have been 4 studies on this, actually a 5th one, what I'll mention in a minute, that's new. In 2018, there was a study done in Washington, D.C. Safety increased. The parents believed that their child was safer by 35% from being able to use one of the vouchers in D.C. to change schools. Another study previously to that in 2013 in D.C., 53% increase in safety because the parent was able to put their child in a safer school. The next study was done over Washington, D.C., New York, and Dayton, Ohio. So you can kind of see the differences there. That one's 51% safer. So parents are looking for safety, and the studies are proving it. Milwaukee actually is the longest voucher program and charter school program in the entire nation. They passed their laws in 1991. Their increase was 48% in Milwaukee of safety. And the new study, that is actually, the paper has been released by Cato Institute, Corey DeAngelis and Angela Dill from Western North Carolina University. They will be actually presenting their study on Tuesday at the Cato Institute, but you can get to it online. If you're interested, let me know. I can put you in touch with them to make sure you're able to listen to the podcast, a live stream of that as they do it. But what they have studied is mental health and school choice, the impact of school choice on mental health. They actually admit there is more data, more stuff they need to study, because the way the data is reported is very, very difficult. They spent a lot of time breaking down the data to make sure they had accurate numbers, what they could and couldn't use to make sure it was consistent for the study, because you want good data coming out. So they made sure they had good data, but it was more limited than what they would have liked. What they found was charter schools. Within the first 3 years of charter school laws being passed, mental health and school bullying, school violence decreases by 10%. They also broke down vouchers for special needs, and education savings accounts. None of those were statistically significant, even though there was a reduction in school violent incidents, but there wasn't statistically significant. But one of the things they were able to do is look at this for people for long term. So as students, 15 to 19, as they grow to be 30 years old, they found a 2.2 percentage point decrease in mental health disorders for those students. So they know there's an impact, and they need more data to start looking into it. So if you're interested in looking into that or listening to their presentation on Tuesday, let me know. I will be glad to get you that information. Now, it's a question I like to ask at every event. What government program has a 100% satisfaction rate among its participants? There's no hands, so most of you think it's a trick question and there is no right answer. There is a right answer. The Arizona Education Savings Account Program has a 100% satisfaction rate among its participants. If you look at the numbers, the families that have less than $28,000 yearly income are the highest satisfied, with 89% extremely satisfied with their choices. If you look at the data further, that same group, those making less than $28,000, are the ones that are the most dissatisfied with their current local public school before they had the choice to move. And that was 56% were very dissatisfied, and another 11% were somewhat dissatisfied. So you're looking at 67% of very low income parents who were very dissatisfied with their local public school and wanted to change. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rob so he can talk a little bit more about how intervention works, what you can do there, and how that program works, dealing with a lot of the internal stuff that's happening rather than some of the other things that school needs to focus on, a lot of the internal things. Well, we have to switch the slides real quick here, and here's Rob.
Thank you, Lenny. While he's doing that, I have just a couple things. So much to say in so little time. It's really sad. I want to make a comment about Dave Sanders. Dave Sanders was a coach at Columbine High School. He's a hero of mine. Whoops, I'm sorry. I'm outside of the... Dave's, mine was the bottom one there. Yeah, thank you. Dave is a hero because when the Columbine incident happened, instead of running away, he ran into the school. He cleared the cafeteria. Most people don't realize that Eric and Dylan weren't planning on shooting people. They had made 2 propane bombs and put them in backpacks and put them in the cafeteria with timers, expecting them to go off during lunch hour. That was how they were going to wreak the havoc that they intended to wreak that day at Columbine. And Dave, thankfully, the timers didn't go off, and the boys approached the school and started shooting. And Dave ran towards the shooting. He confronted the 2 boys. He cleared out the cafeteria. He cleared out a bunch of classrooms and saved probably hundreds of people's lives that day. So he is a absolute hero. We wish there were more Dave Sanders in schools. Lenny also mentioned that 160,000 kids skip school every day for fear of being bullied. That statistic is real and relevant. CDC says that there's 5.4 million that miss at least one day. High schoolers miss one day every year for fear of being bullied. And so what we're really all about and what we were talking about here today is safe schools. And if you don't feel safe, you don't feel connected, you don't feel like you belong, then there's 3 responses that we can have. It's either flight, fight, or freeze. When you don't feel safe, that's what happens. And those 160,000 kids that are skipping school every day, they're fleeing. But for every one of those, I guarantee you, there's equal number that are in freeze mode, not learning, not performing in school, or in fight mode and causing trouble in school. So that's why this is so important. From a policy perspective, there's 2 kinds of school safety. There's physical school safety, which is locks on doors and bulletproof glass and metal detectors and all of those kinds of things that are sort of interventive, and they're important. And a lot of money is getting spent on those. A lot of states have grants out for doing those kinds of things. There's another kind of safety, though, and it's preventative, and that's where Rachel's challenge plays. And what we're really trying to do is get to the students and get to their hearts before an incident happens at all. And we'll talk a little bit about that as I go through this. We'll try to do this really quickly and get to Q&A. But on April 20th, 1999, what was then the worst high school shooting in U.S. history happened at Columbine High School, right here in our own backyards. It's hard for me to believe that this April will be the 20th anniversary of that. Seems like just yesterday to me. But the first person killed in that shooting was Rachel Joy Scott. She was sitting outside having her lunch. Rachel was a pretty normal 17-year-old junior, but she was remarkable in a handful of ways, not the least of which she was kind of an old soul. And she left her family, largely due to the influence of Anne Frank, 6 diaries and a bunch of other writings that she'd done. And one writing that she did 1 month before she died was an essay that she wrote for her 5th period class, and it was called My Ethics, My Codes of Life. She could have written about anything. What 17-year-old junior picks My Ethics, My Codes of Life to write about? But she did, and in that essay she said this: I have a theory that if one person will go out of their way to show compassion, it'll start a chain reaction of the same, and people will never know how far a little kindness can go. So I just want to focus on this for 1 second, because it's really important, and it's the basis for what we're trying to do in schools to help prevent bullying, suicide, and violence. And that is if one person, each and every individual, makes a difference. We all make a difference in our sphere, and so do each one of those kids, and that's what we teach them. Will go out of their way not random acts of kindness or random compassion, but deliberate, intentionally reaching out to other people to connect them, and not just feeling compassion, but show compassion. So if one person will deliberately act, it can and will make a huge difference in our schools. And that's what we're out teaching kids every day, and that's what the basis for our program is. This next thing that I have is a quick video that just talks a little bit about what we see the problem being and what we're trying to do to help address it.
"71% of students report bullying as being a problem in their school. Students can't learn if they're in a fight or flight mode. They need to feel safe and connected."
Teenage bullying and teasing is an epidemic in this country, and the death rate is climbing.
There have been high-profile cases in every corner of the country.
You know, I see these kids in schools every day. So many of them are from broken homes. So many of them are from homes where they go home and see drug abuse. They see alcoholism.
And for them, their lives are filled with hate and anger and fear.
I really wanted to kill myself because I was so miserable.
I was like, what is it? And he said, well, I can't really describe it to you. But he said what they're doing is they're doing presentations in schools all over the country. The story that they're telling is making a tremendous impact.
Rachel's challenge is working hard to promote safer, more connected schools where teaching and learning can thrive.
Our administrative team came back and just said, we've got to have this program.
I sit in the auditorium and I watch the impact that Rachel's story has on these students.
2,000 students sit in the gymnasium, quiet, respectful.
No matter the audience, the reaction is always the same.
Some of the toughest guys I know were impacted by Rachel's challenge in a very positive way.
Oh, you could feel it that, like, man, this was, pretty much hitting everybody on the heart.
Everything around me changed. It changed the way I live my everyday life, the way I look at little things.
Those students used to have issues with each other. Now they're high-fiving each other. Things are changing.
You see kids who put walls up and that comes down, and you get to see the real person. And I think that was really important for all the kids to see.
And they start looking around and they start seeing other kids, really seeing them for the first time and understanding that they're just like me. I'm not alone in this world. And I meet kids that on the day we showed up, they were thinking about pulling the plug. They were done. They were hopeless.
I had everything planned out, and I actually had a rope and pills in my bedroom waiting for me when I got home.
It didn't matter what the reason was, but they were hopeless. They needed something, and Rachel was that something.
We get hundreds of letters every year from students, and I remember reading one that just brought me to tears of a 10-year-old girl who had an exact plan to end her life. But at the end of the letter, she said, "Rachel, you saved my life."
And so many adults I meet, they'll say our kids today, they're lost. They don't have respect. They need to have more rules. And they keep telling kids what they can't do. I see kids that are dying to have someone say, here's what you can do. Here's how you can make a difference in the world. Here's your value.
The issue isn't just about ending bullying. It's much deeper than that. It's about connecting with students and having them connect with each other. They need to feel accepted, wanted, loved, and appreciated. We all do.
Our kids today are dying to know they're not alone. They're dying to know that they matter and that they're cared about.
It's about having compassion that they have a story and having other students realize that when they see this person as a bully, that that's just one layer to them, that this isn't something that defines them at all.
Since Rachel's challenge arrived, you can feel, you can see, you can taste the difference.
We found that there's been a decrease in the number of bullying taking place in the school as a result of Rachel's challenge.
And Rachel's story was that huge thing for them that made the difference, that helped them turn the tide. And they went from hopeless to hopeful that not only their life would mean something, but that they could make a difference in someone else's life. That's the magic of Rachel's story.
So there's lots of science out there that talks about helping students connect with themselves and then helping them connect with each other and the impact that that has on harassment, bullying, suicide, and violence in schools. And that's what we're really trying to do. One of the big buzzwords in schools today is social emotional learning. And really, social emotional learning is just this: understanding and being able to manage my own emotions, and then understanding how to deal with other people. That's what social emotional learning is all about. And it's a learned behavior. And having been in schools all over the country for over a decade now, what I've come to realize is that some of those places we used to learn that as human beings, we don't learn it anymore. We used to learn that in a concerted effort from family, from our faith community, whatever that happened to be, and from the schools. And all three of those institutions, to some degree, have gone away from that with students today in some places. So we're back working with schools to try to say, how can we bring that social emotional learning? How can we have our students learn how to manage their own emotions and deal with each other, and then have that help create a culture in the school, frankly, that's less susceptible to the kinds of things that we're talking about, and therefore more safe. We were in Rice Lake, Wisconsin this last fall, just a few months ago. Kurt Pacholke is the principal there, and he sent us a thank you note. We don't get those all the time, but we got a thank you note from Kurt, and he basically said it as well as anybody I've ever heard say it. Rachel's Challenge, and this is not just Rachel's Challenge, but these kinds of programs stimulate academic and social emotional learning by focusing on the connection between students, staff, and faculty, and that's the important thing. The way we do it is we go to a school for a day. We do an assembly. It could be 1 or 2 assemblies depending on the size of the school, and it's age appropriate. We can do kindergarten through 12th grade. We also do college and corporate events, but primarily focused on schools. And that story that we tell in that assembly is around Rachel's life and what happened at Columbine, against the backdrop of Columbine. And the whole idea is to capture hearts and create some hope and ignite some desire for action. That's what we do with those assemblies. Then we follow up those assemblies by trying to start a service club, a Friends of Rachel Club. We do a 90-minute peer-to-peer training with about 100 students and as many of the faculty and staff as we can get in there. And in that training, we really do some debriefing on what happened in the assembly, and then we try to get them to start thinking about projects that they can do in their school and in their community to move forward and get momentum going by serving other people, because that's how you keep the momentum going. And then in the evening, we come back and do an evening event, a community event if the school wants us to. A lot of times students want to bring their parents or caregivers or family or friends back to hear what they heard during the day. And then it also gives the school a chance to get the community involved and get everybody engaged and on the same page. And then in addition to that, we have a lot of other programs and resources that we can give the school. The important thing to understand here is that this isn't something that we're bringing to the school, say this is something new that you have to add to everything else you're doing. The assembly day, we've had people tell us, I've got a slide just in a minute, is the most powerful thing you can do, most powerful thing you can do for your school in one day, that assembly day. But what we're really doing is working with schools to try to be a catalyst for all of the other things that they're trying to do to get traction around a positive culture. And sometimes you need a significant emotional event, like a story about Rachel or something else happening. Hopefully it's not something else that's a tragedy in your own school, to get people's attention to want to participate in what the school's already doing. And that's what we can do with her story, act as that catalyst. So how does that all really work? The simplest way I could say it is, if you want safer schools, you need to have more connected schools. And Rachel's story really acts as that catalyst I was just talking about. It elicits a real heart response. What we want to do with that heart response is move it into action, to prompt action. And that could be anything from an individual taking some initiative, to students and faculty getting more involved with what the school's already doing, to getting into a service club, to doing some more social emotional learning. We've had, in fact, 7 schools that we know of where students, after we've been in their school, have reported an incident that was about to happen that was going to be a school shooting. So that happens as well. So that heart response elicits an action, and those actions then are what leads to achievement in schools. So that's how we approach it. I try to throw a few things in here from what we share with the students, but when Rachel was 13 years old, she and her sister Dana were playing in the bedroom. They pulled the dresser away from the wall, and on the back of the dresser mirror, Rachel drew an outline of her hands, and in that she wrote, "These hands belong to Rachel Joy Scott and will someday touch millions of people's hearts." 3 years later, she was the first homicide victim at Columbine, and a year after Columbine, her parents finally cleaning out her room, pulled the dresser away, found this, and Dana remembered the day that they drew this. By the time they found what Rachel had written here, Darrell Scott, Rachel's dad, had already spoken to well over 1 million people about what had happened at Columbine that day. And since Columbine has happened, Rachel's Challenge has been able, in live settings like we have here today, speak to over 28 million people around the world. Rachel never had any idea it would be that big, but she did write that, and I use that as a setup for what we did this last year. We did 775 event days, so basically 775 schools all around North America. That's 1,500 programs, over 1,500 individual programs, and those programs represent over 800,000 hours of what a lot of people call mental health training or behavioral health training for students and educators to just over 600,000 students, parents, and educators. So that's the reach that we had. I have another video that talks about reach and impact, but in the interest of time, I think I'm just going to skip through that. I would just tell you what happens when we're in school, whether the school ends up adopting it and using it as a catalyst for what they're already doing or take on all of the things that we do and try to create a different culture, I can promise any administrator that there's at least one, if not more, students that in their populations whose lives are changed forever for the better. And we never know what those students are going to go on and do later. This one came in just this last week, November 7th, from somebody in Texas. Don't know if it was male or female. This is an unsolicited email that came in through our website. We get about 150 of these every year, by the way, that deal specifically with suicide of the thousands that we get. So we know about 150 a year that they tell us about. They feel strongly enough that they'll send us an email about after we've been in their school. And it just says, just moments before I walked into the auditorium to listen to Rachel's Challenge, I was writing a goodbye letter to my friends and family. I've suffered from depression for about 2 years now, and talking to someone never was the answer for me. I was tired of being bullied, and it felt like it wasn't enough. Today, when I listened to the message, I had tears rolling down my eyes, and I learned from Rachel that I need to be confident and have goals for my life. This story saved my life. Thank you. So we get, like I said, over 150 of these every year. I'm going to finish with just another short video because I can talk about what happens when we connect students in schools. And the voucher program is really all about getting them someplace where they can connect, where they're out of an environment that's bad and getting them in someplace they can connect. When we connect students in school, we did a 2-year engagement in North Carolina with a company called Trillium Health Services. And Trillium is a Medicaid, Medicare nonprofit organization in North Carolina. They wanted to get behavioral health training into the schools, and they decided to use us to do that. So the first year we did 140 middle schools and high schools, and the second year we did 170 elementaries, and they funded it through what they were saving in their Medicaid, Medicare dollars. We went out to talk to some of the schools, and so I just want to leave you with a little bit of information from teacher, counselor, and students about what happens when you get them back connected in their schools.
Whole experience of Rachel's Challenge, from the first assembly through the 4-club training through chain reaction, has been something I have never experienced in all of my years in education. It has probably been one of the most important things that I have ever seen or been a part of. It feels like we have an ally in Rachel's Challenge. I still have students that I connect with today. They're so thankful and they're so grateful that somebody finally listened. They had an avenue to share what was going on in their life, and they were able to make that connection to someone that has now made the connection to get them help. I've seen it. The mental health breakdown in North Carolina has been tremendous, and to watch something like this program come in and open up barriers has been unreal.
The experience at the middle school was something that was amazing to watch. The students, as they were going through the presentation, you could watch years of hurt and years of pain just melt away, and they were able to begin that healing process.
When I first got to school, I never thought I could fit in, because everybody would tell me, like, you're not fast, you're not strong, and all that. And I see this girl up here, she's always been dreamful to all her dreams, and it just brought some tears in me that I must have many hearts. It made me feel like I can do anything. Like, she tried her best to do anything, and it makes me feel like I can do anything too.
I just see all the positivity that has come out of this program. For a while, I felt like our students didn't have anywhere to go. They didn't have any mental health providers within our area. But I've seen that increase in the last few years.
I think that Rachel's Challenge is definitely a mental health resource. I think that it really helps children understand at the elementary school level that these feelings are okay.
Prejudice simply means to prejudge others.
I think that it gives children the permission to accept others for who they are, and also gives them the permission to actually forgive and show other students that there's hope for tomorrow.
I was thinking how I used to get picked on when I was little and how people treated me. It makes me feel happy because I know that there's other people out there in the world that wants to make a change and a difference in other people's lives.
I watched the students go through the emotions of that day and open up. Some students shared personal stories that I don't believe that they had told anyone. And we took that and we were able to help those kids and get them the mental health resources that they needed. And I don't know that that would have happened otherwise.
During my childhood, I've had a lot of dreams, and I've always been put down and said that I couldn't reach my goals. Now, I feel like I can reach them, and I want to go for higher things in my life.
Excuse me. I've been in education a really long time, and I have looked for things that show students how to love one another and be compassionate with one another and kind to one another. And this program does that. It brings together students in such genuine and positive ways. I've never seen anything like it.
There's no secret or no magic in that fostering hope, igniting change, connecting people, especially having students themselves reach out to people that are disconnected, isolated, the outliers, and getting them brought in, makes the school safer. The thing that we have that we've been, it may seem funny for me to use this word, but blessed with, is a tragedy that that family was willing to make into a story and take to the world that gets people's attention to think about connecting people. So that's what we're doing. There's other organizations out there that do it and do it well as well. The thing that makes us unique, I believe, and the reason why it's successful for us is that we have that significant emotional event that we can talk to students about without them having to experience one themselves, to get their attention so that the other things can actually work. So I brought a couple of things. I did bring a book. I'm stepping out of the camera here, but we put together, I mentioned those 150 or so emails that we get every year. We put together a little booklet every year that just has some of them unedited. There's 85 or so of them in here if you're interested in looking at some of that, just to see the kinds of things that kids are going through. It'll, on one hand, break your heart. On the other hand, there's hope in that these kids reached out. And then the other thing I brought is just a simple one-page white paper on what we think works on the preventative side as opposed to the interventive side. And I'll finish up what I said earlier from a policy perspective. A lot of money gets spent on the preventative side because it's easy to get your hands around that. You can see new locks, you can see bulletproof glass. It's hard to measure what didn't happen in a school, so it's harder for us to get funding. So to the extent that if you're thinking about it as you go forward, I appreciate that you guys are doing anti-bullying grants. Don't forget that the prevention is equally as important as the physical safety from our perspective. So I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.